What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be talking about the Bitcoin price chart after yesterday's and Tuesday's pop back up in here, getting as high as 94,700. We'll talk about a couple things that were talked about over there in markets in the morning on recovery structures, what would really be the most ideal, just for clarity's sake. We'll talk about the altcoin market and whether or not we have a structural setup over here that would favor a breakout into new highs once this is all wrapped up. Then, of course, targets on how high it could go in the event that it is capable of getting through the all-time high. We'll check in on the XRP price chart, which still hasn't had the juice to really get out of here just yet, waddling around, continuing to range after a break takes place in XRP and, of course, in Bitcoin, as Trump says that the tariffs are going to come down there on Tuesday. Then Wednesday, after markets are closed, the messaging's totally mixed all over again. And it's getting to a point where people can't really figure out what is going on. Does anybody know what's going on? Are the tariffs coming down? Are they not coming down? The market is now massively confused. And the Dow Jones even took back most of that 1,200 point rise that it had, closing the day out only up 400, now down another 97 from that. So it's been like a bipolar market at this point, with the news wire controlling everything happening. Fortunately, though, for things like Bitcoin, we could see all those bullish divergences emerging in there. We saw price shift its way up. We talked all about that late last week and earlier this week. We got to see the reaction happen in there. Now, like talked about in markets in the morning, the $1 million question is, what do we look like from here? Now, for the sake of an easy read, what I would like to see is Bitcoin just really push up there to, $103,000 to $107,000. And then I totally would expect that we go into potentially a multi-month, maybe not that long, ABC correction to take place from there before we can issue our last parabola in there, which my personal target is somewhere between $120,000 to $130,000 if we do get the break into the all-time high. That is my end of cycle Bitcoin price area. A lot will disagree with that, but that's the great thing about markets. It's all agreeing and disagreeing on price, and that's what makes a market. For every buyer, there is a seller. The person buying right here thinks it's going to go higher. The person selling here thinks it's not going to go higher. For me, that's up in here. But for my idea to continue to remain true, this is what would be the easiest thing to read. Now, in markets in the morning, I showed all different variances of what they can actually look like in here that can make them far more complicated. There we go. I'll remove some of the squigglies and make it a little bit easier to view here on the screen. But as you can see, it is quite common that even before getting there, we could still stall out where we're at right now for a little while. In all of these, that is what happens when price gets back up. Now, the messaging I was trying to portray there in markets in the morning, and the messaging I've been portraying in past videos, is that you have all the things saying bullish divergence is happening in here. We've talked about it. It's like the FTX collapse happening. You get the tariff stuff down in here to scare the crud out of everybody. You have all the things that make it seem like that is the bottom. So we're not sitting here arguing over bottom. If it goes lower, I would be surprised. What we're talking about is the work on our way back up. The wall of worry, the ranging, the resistances as we try to make our way back to the upside. You could see that it can be very inconsistent. We often state that ranges can be chaotic by design. Day traders trying to trade ranges will typically get lit up. In ranges, there really tend to only be a couple areas of interest. That's being a buyer down here at the 236 and a seller up here at the 702 and the 786 Fibonacci retracement levels. Anything in between is considered the dumb money zone. And we can see how that can happen. That if you're trying to play in the middle of the ranges, you can find yourself in problems. However, much more of a safety cushion down here at this 236 area compared to anywhere else. Now, we'll get all of that off the screen. We'll talk about things that are favorable. Things that you can tell is that Bitcoin has gotten above the 50% retracement level. It's held a daily candle close on top of it. It's still on top of it today. Typically, getting that far to 50% and being able to hold above 50% has been a good thing. You can see in here, typically that tends to be the area of resistance in there, making it more difficult. So it seems like this has a favorable probability right now. But even in the event that it does get up in there, I don't think the market is still ready to expand and go crazy at this moment. And if we see price action come from XRP, I still think there would be resistance there in that $2.80, $2.90, $3 area, and that this market would still ABC correct before we see the absolute euphoria, craziness, narratives, right? Narratives are probably going to be companies adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet. Fidelity Digital Assets even posted that this morning, that we've seen Bitcoin supply on exchanges drop due to public company purchases, something we anticipate accelerating in the near future. There's only 2.6 million Bitcoin on exchanges, which is the lowest level since November of 2018. So over 425,000 Bitcoin moved off exchanges since November of 2024. And public companies have added nearly 350,000 Bitcoin post-US election, and they've bought 30,000 Bitcoin per month in 2025. Mix that in with United States Bitcoin reserve, other countries' reserves, things like that, right? We have our narrative. Then I think you have like 50 altcoin ETFs in the pipeline here in the next couple of months. So, I think on a big enough time frame here over several months, things are doing what you would want them to do, at least so far, for Bitcoin to lead into that type of moment where we see euphoria hit the cryptocurrency market and you finally see things like Total 3 escape into a new all-time high. Now, things I've pondered is, well, how high do I think Total 3 could go if that even happens, right? We are in a really weird moment in markets right now, right? There's still a lot of stuff that has to play out. These China tariffs have to be essentially removed for us to not slip into a major recession here in the United States. One has to think that they probably are, but if they stayed, right, things would hit the fan. So we've got stuff we've got to get through here first. But in the event of pandemonium and euphoria, how high could Total 3 go? One of the things I've been studying is just, how Bitcoin reacted. Because if you were here during the entire 2022 bear, 2023 absolute lull, we spent a lot of time talking about how we were mimicking the behavior of what it was like back in 2014 and 15 in the crypto market here. That even though we set a new high, we were acting like we were in a bear, right? Even when that new high was set in November of 2021, it was like the peak of the market happened back in April and May. But as we've gotten back to the all-time high, we've done this interesting behavior of not setting new highs and then finding supports on top of previous resistances, which is what climbs typically look like, right? But the thing that was interesting when Bitcoin got back to its all-time high back in 2017 is that it actually got close, went above it, and then big fall below. This was like the first time where we didn't find support on top of the previous high. And that's obviously been very similar to what we've seen over here in the altcoin market currently right now. While Bitcoin has still held on there, we can see the altcoin market has dipped slightly below. And that's, of course, varying by different assets. XRP hasn't come close to that. It still sits way above the peak of March of 2024. Whereas some assets sit below the low of August of 2024, which we showed in yesterday's live stream. But in general, the market sits right here, right? And it can be common to fall down after attempting to get through the high on the first try. Putting those side by side, we could see the corrective structures that take place in here. And I'll take all my arrows off the screen in here just to zoom in to show the corrective structure. And I'll swap that to a lower time frame. That you would have to assume we're likely somewhere around right here, right? If this altcoin market's going to go for a full recovery. And that like crazy alt season wildness doesn't actually kick in until you can break through all the retracement levels and get on your way out, where we finally see this Bitcoin dominance come crumbling down through here, which I've got all these higher lows marked on here, and we'll come back and revisit this here in just a minute. But that we've essentially seen all the phases in here of what a crashing structure would be. And again, this is one of those things where there's one thing on the chart that impacts it that just likely would not be there, and that would be the Trump pump from back in March on the tweet about XRP, Solana, and Cardano. And what we would really have happening in here is 1, 2, 3, 4. And we would have had our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rolls back up to wave 4 within wave 5 for wave 6. And then 7, that's capitulation. We're working our way back up in here. That was our crashing structure. That's the completion. Then it's about working our way back up into the retracement levels to then attempt to expand, right? And I know that's crazy, but even Bitcoin had some crazy action that happened back here in 2017 that just was event driven. But it's more like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Below our lows, eliminating the Trump pump. Right. And that's what's made these charts so difficult, is with that thing on there. But eliminating it, we actually have a very clean structure that actually looks just right. And from here, Bitcoin essentially does approximately a 4.236 extension of this range. Does a little bit more, but the general area is a 4.236 extension of this range before it enters into a prolonged bearish period, which if you 4.236 extensioned the current market cap, gets you in the area of a little bit less than $3 trillion, which I think is fair. I'm way more skeptical that we're going to be able to continue going beyond that and keep this thing going, but more so that that would actually be the actual end. But let's hypothesize this idea of what that would essentially look like. What that would essentially be is that we're just kind of climbing a wall of worry right now until we can get our way back into these retracement levels, until it finally starts to kind of correct in here and stay there. Now, why would that make sense? Well, because if that's what Bitcoin is doing as well, is that it's going to work its way back up with a wall of worry, but then enter into a correction. It would make sense that the altcoin market would follow along and do the same. Not necessarily that the altcoin market would in any way outperform Bitcoin, but that it would also work its way back into the retracements and still yet to be able to have an expansionary breakout moment. But as I started this video talking about Bitcoin, that I'm thinking, we're only probably going to like $120,000 to $130,000 for Bitcoin, which certainly is not a 4.236 extension of this range like we're talking about with the altcoin market. Then why would the altcoin market go a 4.236 extension of that range? And that would be because of how cycles historically come to an end. That it ends with the opening of breadth in the market, and that the real winners of the market are actually the altcoin market and not Bitcoin, because it's the last hurrah of the market. It's the most extreme risk taking. It's this time is different. We're going up forever, take on all the risk. But that we wouldn't actually see any of that kick in until we got to this moment and we started shifting up in here for Bitcoin, as if right here, which if you recall, that's actually even what we saw back over here, is that the altcoin market really started to take off here in this moment right here when this ABC correction was completed. And the altcoin market rips in here, right? This is where XRP goes from 50 cents to $3, whereas Bitcoin goes from 68 to 95 or 100. But that we would see an even more extreme version of it with the altcoin market, as it is the actual end of the cycle. And you can go study all past cycles and how they come to a conclusion. It's the end of the cycle where the biggest hurrahs on the altcoin market happen, followed by the biggest crashes afterwards. But that we would finally see the Bitcoin dominance unwind itself at that time. And personally, I think it's actually going to unwind violently due to the parabola being built over here on the Bitcoin dominance and the series of higher lows that are set in here, that these types of unwinds happen very quickly. Everyone just got to watch how the stock market just ate through all the higher lows that happened in there in the blink of an eye. This is typical. And we talked about this stuff back in 2021 when it happened on things like Ethereum, where you can just zoom in on here and it was just nothing but higher lows constantly being printed throughout here. Every little low is a higher low, and it just kept grinding and grinding, never taking out any of them, building a parabola. But you could just see there's no lower lows placed between any of these points right through here. It's all just higher lows that get placed in here. And so it just gives stop loss areas. And so what happens when you have moments like that? You get that. You get absolute annihilation that happens through them. And we have built that over here on the Bitcoin dominance of just nothing but higher lows grinding its way all the way up in here. Even when these ones right here, you got a little taste of it, of how it can just completely rip through them in here. And then now we've come back to doing it all over again, and we're doing it even more right now. That is just building higher and higher lows, never testing these. So I think when this thing turns on itself, it's going to turn very violently, and a violent turn on the Bitcoin dominance would imply what? That this thing is going to outperform Bitcoin. Total 3. Why would it make sense that it would violently outperform Bitcoin? Because that's the end of the Bitcoin cycle. Now, I think everybody's going to argue till they're blue in the face on whether or not it's going to stop there, or go into new lows. And I'm not here to make that argument. But what I'm here to say is I think every single one of these levels are going to get taken out. I think we will go below 46.75% and do it very violently, where it could just take a matter of a few weeks for it to take it all out. That you could spend 2 years in that trend and maybe take 3 weeks to take the whole thing back once it really gets in motion. And that type of move happening on parabolas that get built in higher lows, where it just absolutely slams them all, happens in an environment where we're at the end of a cycle for Bitcoin. So I think we have the structural setup for Bitcoin to imply that something like that could be coming. I think we have the structural setup of something like that happening in the altcoin market, of what happens after you attempt to break break through the all-time high and how it pulls back, and that then you head into expansion. And I think we have that set up over here in the Bitcoin dominance structurally of what happens when things get annihilated by having the parabolas being built in them. I even put it on a smaller time frame to show that how that happens in there when you have that where there's nothing but higher lows placed throughout the whole thing. I mean, really zoom on it. You can see it all in here. Right? Higher low, higher low, higher low, higher, 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 higher. I'll stop saying higher. But you just see how they go in here, right? And so what eventually ends up happening? It gets absolutely annihilated. And that's just what we have in here. And it would make sense for that to happen in an environment like that and in an environment like that. So, I think we have things favorable right now. But like leading back to the earlier discussion, right now, it's all about trying to work our way back up into these retracement levels and how that's going to look. And like I said, this would be the easiest one, right? This would just be the one that I've got like the read on it. We're good. We're great. I'm mindful that we could do these ABCs down in here, and then that would leave a lot of confusion, worry, concern, things like that. And that we just still have to be mindful of them, and I have to be mindful of them. I'm cheering for this. I see optimism to think it could happen with us being above the 50% retracement for Bitcoin, that it's just setting up how it should be and how we've been discussing for months on end. It still looks right. Just can't lay down the guard that it's not going to do some type of correction down in here. And if it does, is it the end of the world? No, because we go back to the bigger picture and say, hey, look, we saw on the bigger time frames, right? 2-day, 3-day time frames. We saw all the bullish divergences emerging. We talked about it on Monday's video. We've had the FTX style event happen down here at the lows. Like, it looks like we've marked the bottom. It's just about trying to get back up in here. So we're looking good. We just have more work to do to keep this picture true, and we're not there yet. But if we get there, right, it'll still be, hey, ABC correction on the way. People are going to lose their mind, but it's all the setup for the bigger picture to happen in here and for the rest of the market to rip. And for like things like XRP, I think that's where that big rip happens. And it's still just this big fight in here to try to be able to get out of these levels to at least get back into retracements, which even if we get into the retracements, it's still just that I think there's an ABC to correct in here. So there's just still more work ahead. But like I want to just like kind of portray like the big picture image of the way I'm looking at it through the whole market right now. And that's my idea, and that's the way I view it. And that's what this whole idea has been when we talk about these things and when we zoom out on that, right? That's what this whole view is, right? That we've worked all this stuff out. This becomes the end of the cycle rally. This is the ABC at the high. We've printed this last correction in here, and then we go for the final parabola. And again, this is one of those reasons why this is the model I'm following. And that's why I'm not seeing things of like when people talk like 250, 300, 400, $500,000 for Bitcoin, things like that, or even 180. I don't see it because this is the model I'm following. And essentially right now, we're just trying to work our way back up in here to work our way to finally go into the parabolic ending, the release of the Bitcoin dominance, the roar of the altcoin market, the roar of XRP, and then Lord help us all, the end. So there's still a lot of work to do to be able to get back to there. Just like in the intro of all of my videos, that's the big key moment in time on whether or not things get crazy. There's various shapes and forms we can take to work our way back up there. Hopefully, it's just a nice wall of worry climb that happens in here. And the same thing goes for Bitcoin. There's various shapes and forms it can take. Hopefully, it's just a quicker, easier, simple to read version. Being above that 50% retracement level is optimistic that it could be, but I figured it was important to share when you're watching this YouTube channel and understanding where my perspective is coming from and what I'm talking and what I'm looking for. This is my bigger, broader idea of what's happening in the cryptocurrency market. I do think we're nearing the end of the equity market. I think a lot of stuff has already permanently topped in the equity market. I think it's all a process here happening on how it's all going to come to a conclusion. I think it's a little bit blurry in this exact moment in time that we're living in. We're also met with all of these different news catalysts that just push and pull the market in each direction. But overall, I think this is what's going to lead to the big peak YOLO, crazy fall apart dominance moment of the market. That's how we'll get there. That's what will get XRP to get all the way out there to that 4.236 extension on the market cap, which is like 8, $9, $10, which is crazy as it is. Still, all these weekly candle closes in here have still held above the all-time high weekly candle close with all of this. And the fact that we've seen all these bullish divergences on various time frames happen in here, it still just looks fine. I think the thing I'm more concerned about is in the event of us going through a moment like that. I do think there's a lot of people in this market that do actually genuinely believe in like $1,000 price for XRP. And this is a price area I've talked about for several years. I've been making YouTube videos about XRP since right here in November of 2019, when the price, I don't know, I think it's like 30 cents in there, maybe 25. That's always been the spot. So when we get there, that'll be it for me for the majority of my bag. As long as we get it, I think that's the path of how we'll get there. I think that's the bigger picture for Bitcoin and how it gets there. And I think it happens during this moment with the rest of the market, not as an independent, isolated event. I do think something like the SEC finally formally announcing that there's been the settlement versus Ripple, like that could catalyze the price to like go back to the retracement levels. They can push the price there. But in order for price to actually like expand and get moving, I could bet dimes to donuts it's going to happen during this moment. But all right, I'll quit my rambling at this point. That's the big picture of how I'm looking at the market right now. I think we're in the wall of worry climb right now. A lot of times these climbs can be a little chaotic, but hopefully it just kind of follows along with that structure that we've been talking about. So as we continue that wall of worry climb, we'll keep an eye on it. Otherwise, it's a green day in the market. When I started recording this thing, we had a big mix. There was a lot of red out there. It took me a couple of hours to put this together. Things have really flipped green over there in the market now, but we'll see how today continues to go. And as long as we can continue to climb, it looks pretty good. So, all right, that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys can check out my newsletter over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Most recent one includes a 42-minute audio recording in there. I audio record all of my newsletters. I release 2 of them a month. You get access to all the past ones as well by signing up for the newsletter. You can, of course, check out bcbacker.com with over 40 videos and 11 hours of content teaching you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro. There are links within the descriptions of each of my videos to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com and at bcbacker.com. Otherwise, have a great day, and I'll check in with you soon. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor, but if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.